Have you ever, like, looked back at a relationship and just thought to yourself, what in the world was I thinking?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're even in one right now,
Right.
and you know something's just not right,
Yeah.
but you just feel so incredibly stuck.
It's so common.
Like you can't pull away.
Yeah, that feeling of being trapped in a relationship that, deep down isn't good for you.
Yeah.
It's something that so many people unfortunately experience.
And it's so confusing because often these relationships, they start off
Right.
with like the most intense, passionate, like whirlwind romance. You know, the kind we see in the movies and hear about in songs.
Yeah.
It feels like the real thing, you know?
Right. It feels like
This is it.
this is it. This is the one.
This is true love.
Yes, exactly. But then that love,
It starts to hurt.
it starts to hurt. Yeah.
And that's when things get really confusing.
Right.
Because you might find yourself kind of making excuses for their behavior.
Oh.
Maybe even hiding the truth about what's happening from your friends and your family.
Mm-hmm.
And you're constantly walking on eggshells. You're
Yeah.
worried about setting them off.
Oh, totally.
And you start doubting yourself. You know,
Very.
maybe I am overreacting.
Maybe it's me.
Maybe I am wrong here.
Maybe I'm the problem.
And what makes it even harder
Yeah.
is even when there's such clear signs,
Right.
lies, manipulation, hurtful behavior,
Mm-hmm.
the thought of leaving can just feel impossible.
It feels completely overwhelming.
So in this deep dive today, we're going to try and tackle some really big questions
Okay.
that I think are really important for people.
Okay.
Why do we stay with people who make us feel so bad?
Yeah.
What keeps us from seeing those red flags until it's too late?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we finally break free?
Right. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
That's often the biggest challenge.
So today we're going to dig into the psychology behind what we call toxic love. We're going to look at concepts like codependency
Mm-hmm.
and emotional manipulation
Right.
and try and understand what makes these relationships feel so addictive.
Yes.
What are those warning signs that we miss?
The red flags.
Yeah, exactly. And why leaving is so hard.
And often why leaving is so hard
Yeah,
is because of this thing called the trauma bond, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
absolutely. And I think it's important to note that this is not just abstract theory.
Right.
We're going to be looking at real stories,
Exactly. Real people.
real experiences,
Yeah.
real emotions, the struggles that I think so many people have gone through.
Right. Have gone through, we're currently going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really want you to be able to take away some insights
Mm-hmm.
from this and really apply it to your own life.
Exactly. We want this to resonate with you if you've ever felt trapped in a relationship,
Uh-huh.
or if you've ever had the experience of having a really, really hard time letting go of a relationship that was ultimately damaging to you.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into that first big question.
Okay.
Why is toxic love so addictive?
Yeah, it's such a great question.
It's such a contrast when
Well,
you
yeah.
think about like real love, genuine love,
Mm.
healthy love. It's
Mhm.
peaceful. It brings a sense of calm
Yes.
and security to your life.
Yeah.
But toxic love, it feels like
Right.
anything but peaceful.
It's like the opposite. Yeah.
It is the opposite.
That's chaotic.
Yeah, and that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Real love does provide that foundation of
Yeah.
stability
Yes, exactly.
and mutual respect.
Absolutely.
But toxic love, it operates almost
Right.
in a way that's very similar to a drug.
Yes, it's like an addiction.
Yeah.
And there's this key concept in psychology that helps explain this called intermittent reinforcement.
Okay, so
Yeah.
intermittent reinforcement,
It's a big word.
that's a big word.
That's really important.
Yeah, what does that actually look like in a relationship?
Think of it like a slot machine in a casino.
Okay.
You pull the lever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you win.
Right.
Sometimes you lose.
Yeah.
But that unpredictability,
Right.
that chance of hitting the jackpot
Yeah.
keeps you pulling that lever.
Keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So it's the random nature of those rewards
Yes.
that makes it so habit forming.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I see how that applies to a relationship.
Yeah.
Because in a toxic dynamic, it's not constant negativity all the time.
It's not.
Right.
It's not constant negativity.
There are those moments, there are those periods
Yeah,
where things feel amazing.
exactly.
Where the person is loving and attentive.
Right, and that's what keeps you hooked. So you'll have,
Mhm.
you'll have one day they'll shower you with affection.
Yeah.
They'll say all the right things, they'll make you feel like you're the most important person in the world.
Yeah.
And then the next day they'll be cold,
Yeah.
distant, critical,
Or just ignore you completely.
or they might just completely ignore you,
Yeah.
ghost you.
And it's that switch,
It is that sudden switch.
that unpredictability
Unpredictability.
that keeps the person hooked.
That's what keeps you hooked, yeah.
Always kind of hoping for that return.
Right. You're always hoping for a return to the good times.
For those good times, yeah.
Yeah, you're always thinking like, oh, this is just a phase.
They'll go back.
They'll change. They'll go back to being that person that I fell in love with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a real story here
Okay.
about Emily, who was in a 5-year relationship.
5 years.
Wow, that really illustrates this cycle.
Yeah. What stood out to you about her story?
Well, she talked about how the relationship began like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
You know, he overwhelmed her with gifts.
Right.
He called her his soulmate right away.
Oh, wow. Which is interesting.
It is interesting, yeah.
You know, he was saying he'd never felt this way about anyone before.
Right. I mean, that's classic love bombing.
It's that intense idealization phase, you know?
Yeah.
It's a really common pattern in these types of relationships.
Yeah. And then just like that,
Yeah.
he flipped.
He flipped a switch, became a completely different person.
Uh.
Emotionally unavailable, cold.
Yeah. And when she would try and figure out what was happening,
Right.
he would say things like,
Oh, like what?
"You're being too clingy.
Oh, classic.
I need space.
Oh, yeah.
You're imagining things."
Which is also gaslighting.
Yeah.
Making you doubt your own reality.
Making her doubt her own reality.
Yeah. And that can be incredibly damaging
Incredibly damaging.
for your self-esteem.
And all of those phrases are so effective
Oh, they are.
at just shutting down communication.
They are. They're meant to shut down communication.
Right. And making you,
Yeah.
or making her in this case, question her own needs.
Yes, absolutely.
And her perception.
Making you question your own perception of reality.
But here's where that intermittent reinforcement
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
takes hold. Because just as Emily started to withdraw,
Right.
you know, maybe even think about ending the relationship,
Mm.
he would suddenly pull her back in
Right.
with grand gestures and
Yeah.
declarations of love.
Oh, wow. Like, what kind of things would he say?
Oh, he would say things like, "You're the love of my life. I don't want to lose you."
So he would pull her back in
Yeah.
with these, like, really intense declarations of love.
Yeah, just as she was
Oh, no.
stepping back.
It's almost like he could sense it.
Right.
Like he could sense that she was pulling away.
And he would just...
And he would just do whatever he needed to do to reel her back in.
Yeah, and it creates this surge of hope
It does.
and relief.
It does, yeah.
And you start thinking, okay, maybe things can go back to how they were.
Maybe he can change.
Maybe he can change.
Maybe this is just a phase.
Maybe this is just a blip.
Yeah.
And that's the push and pull.
It is. It's that push and pull.
It creates the addiction.
And that's exactly what creates that addictive quality.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like a reward
Yeah.
when they start being nice again.
Yeah.
So you crave that niceness.
Yeah. And so the key takeaway here is that toxic love isn't actually love.
It's not love, no.
You know, it's not genuine connection or care.
It's not about genuine connection. It's not about mutual respect.
It's a cycle of emotional starvation.
Exactly.
Followed by...
And these intermittent crumbs
Yeah.
of reward.
Which leads us to the next big topic here.
Which is his.
The red flags.
The red flags, yes.
You know, those warning signs?
They're so important.
That are often there,
Yeah.
sometimes right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning.
But we tend to ignore them.
We do. We tend to ignore them. We rationalize them away.
Until it's too late.
Exactly. We're like, oh, it's not a big deal.
It's not.
It's fine. It's fine. They'll change.
Yeah, so.
It's so hard to see clearly.
It is.
When you're in a situation like that, you know,
Yeah.
you're emotionally invested. You want it to work out.
You want to, yeah.
And your judgment gets clouded.
Your judgment gets totally clouded.
By hope.
By hope, yeah.
And the desire to believe in this good version.
Right, you're always hoping.
Of the person.
You're hoping that that person that you fell in love with is still in there somewhere.
That they're still in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So what are some of those major red flags?
Okay, so some of the red flags.
That we might be rationalizing away.
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones, and it's so insidious.
Yeah.
Is gaslighting.
Gaslighting.
Gaslighting. And it's basically where someone twists reality.
Okay.
And they make you doubt your own sanity.
So they make you question.
They make you question your own version of events.
Yeah, like what actually happened?
Exactly. They might deny things that they said or
Yes.
things that they did. Or they'll try and make you feel like you're misremembering things.
Yeah.
And the goal here is to make you question your own sanity.
To make you think.
To make you think that you're the problem.
I'm crazy. Yeah, to make you think, I'm crazy, I'm imagining things, I'm making this up.
And you start to wonder
And that's why it's so insidious.
if you are the problem.
Because it makes you start to doubt yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your perception of reality.
So another one you mentioned earlier is love bombing.
Love bombing.
And this one's tricky because...
It is tricky.
You know, at first glance, it sounds like a good thing.
It does.
You know, you're getting overwhelmed with affection.
Who doesn't love being showered with attention and gifts and affection?
Exactly. So
it's all the good stuff, right?
Right.
But it's the intent behind it.
Right.
So it's grand gestures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Constant compliments, extravagant gifts, telling you everything you want to hear.
So it's really about the intent behind it.
It is. It's the intent.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Like genuine affection is sustainable.
Right.
Love bombing is not.
So how can you tell the difference?
The love bombing is often very manipulative.
Okay.
It's a way to very quickly create a strong emotional bond with you and a dependence on them.
So they're trying.
And they're trying to like reel you in as quickly as possible by giving you everything you want.
Yeah.
So you're thinking like, wow, this person's amazing.
This is incredible.
They're my soulmate. This is it.
This is too good to be true.
And it's too good to be true. That's the problem.
Yeah. And so
because it can't last.
They're creating this fantasy.
They are. They're creating a fantasy of this like perfect relationship.
But it's not based in reality.
No, it's not sustainable.
What's another red flag?
Another huge red flag is extreme jealousy and possessiveness.
Okay.
And this is often disguised as love, you know?
Right.
I'm so in love with you. I can't stand the thought of you talking to anybody else.
I just love you so much.
I just love you so much, yeah.
Right.
But it's actually rooted in insecurity.
Yeah.
And a need to control you.
Right.
So it can look like them constantly checking up on you.
Yeah.
Getting mad when you spend time with your friends.
Right.
Or family.
Accusing you of infidelity.
Yes. Yes. Accusing you of cheating.
Yeah.
Even though you've never given them any reason to believe that.
And it's about control.
It is. It's all about control.
Not care.
Not care. Exactly.
Another big one for me.
What is it?
Is the guilt trips.
The guilt trips.
And the emotional manipulation.
Oh, yeah. The emotional manipulation.
This is something that I think
it's so common.
So many people experience.
It is.
Even in relationships that aren't romantic.
Absolutely. It can happen in friendships. It can happen with family members.
Yeah, it can happen with coworkers.
Coworkers, yeah.
You know, and it basically involves them making you feel responsible for their emotions.
Right. And using your guilt to control you.
Yeah.
So classic examples of this would be like they cheated on you because you weren't giving them enough attention.
Right.
Or they yelled at you because you made them angry.
Or they lied to you.
Right. Or they lied to you because they didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
It's never their fault.
Yeah.
It's always your fault.
And finally, we have isolation.
Isolation, yes.
And I think this one's really insidious.
It's probably the most insidious, I think.
Yeah.
Because toxic people.
Yeah.
They often will try to cut you off from your support system.
Yeah.
Your friends, your family, anybody who might
give you another perspective.
Yeah. Or who might encourage you to leave them.
Right. And they do this by saying things like...
Well, they'll say things like, your friends don't like me.
Your family doesn't understand our love.
Your family doesn't understand us.
It's us against the world.
It's us against the world.
Yeah.
So they create this...
They try to isolate you.
Us versus them mentality.
Exactly. And that makes you more dependent on them because you don't have anybody else.
And it also means that it's less likely that you're going to have those...
outside voices.
Right. You don't have anybody else to kind of check in with and be like, hey, is this normal?
Yeah. Am I crazy?
Am I crazy? Is this okay?
So the takeaway here is that the moment you feel like you can't talk to anyone...
about the relationship.
About your relationship.
Yes.
That's a huge red flag.
That is a major red flag.
Yeah.
Because healthy relationships thrive on open communication.
Exactly.
And connection with your support system.
So we see these cycles, these red flags.
Right.
But then the big question is... why do we stay?
Yeah, why do we stay when we know on some level that we should go?
That we should leave.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
it's
such a challenge because leaving a toxic relationship isn't just a simple decision.
It's not just about making the decision.
No, it's about breaking free.
It's about breaking free. It's about rewiring your brain.
From what can feel like a mental prison.
It feels like a mental prison, yeah.
And we have another real story here. About Jake, he was in a 6-year relationship.
6 years.
And his experience really highlights this feeling of being trapped.
Yeah, so what was going on with Jake?
His girlfriend was emotionally abusive.
Oh, okay.
You know, he said she controlled every aspect of his life.
Oh, wow.
Like who he could talk to, where he could go, what he could wear.
It's like she wanted to control every single aspect of his life.
Absolutely. His friends and family saw it.
Right.
And they kept telling him to leave.
Right, but he couldn't.
But he felt completely unable to.
Why do you think that is?
I think she'd made him feel
Yeah,
so dependent on her.
totally. And that's what they do.
Yeah.
They make you feel like you need them.
Like he needed her.
Yeah.
Like he was nothing without her.
You're nothing without me. You need me.
And it's so sad because he believed that for years.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
And that's the thing about these toxic relationships. They
Yeah.
don't just break your heart.
Yeah.
They break your sense of self.
They break you down as a person.
Yeah. And I think there's this
Yeah.
external frustration from people
Oh, absolutely.
who haven't experienced this.
Yeah.
You know, they say, just break up. What's so hard about that?
Just leave. I don't understand what the big deal is.
But they don't understand the psychological conditioning
Exactly. They don't understand the depth of the psychological conditioning.
that takes place.
Yeah.
You know, leaving isn't,
It's not a simple decision.
it's not just a single act. It's about rewiring your brain.
Yes, rewiring your brain. It's a process.
After years of being in this cycle.
After years, potentially, of being in this cycle of abuse.
So let's delve a little deeper into why leaving feels so impossible.
Okay.
You know, we talked about intermittent reinforcement.
Right.
So how does that play into the difficulty of actually leaving?
Well, as we talked about, it creates this addiction to those good times.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always chasing that high.
Yeah.
You're always hoping that things will go back to the way they were in the beginning.
Maybe just one more time.
Maybe if I just do this, or if I just say that, or if I just, change this about myself.
And you kind of cling to
Right, you cling to the hope.
the memory of those positive moments,
Yeah, you cling to the memory of the good times,
even though they're fleeting.
even though they were so fleeting, and they probably weren't even that great.
And they might not have even been that great.
Yeah, but you kind of like,
You build them up in your mind.
you romanticize them.
You romanticize
in your
them.
mind.
And
Yeah.
so you keep pulling that lever,
You keep pulling that lever, you keep hoping for that jackpot.
hoping for that jackpot.
Yeah, and that's what keeps you stuck.
And then there's this idea of a trauma bond.
The trauma bond, yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so a trauma bond is a really powerful
Mm-hmm.
emotional attachment
Yeah.
that develops in relationships where there's a cycle of abuse.
So it's really about this intertwining of love and pain.
It is. It's this weird intertwining of love and pain.
Right. So the person who's experiencing the abuse,
Can start to feel intensely responsible
they feel responsible for their abuser.
for the abuser
Yes.
and their well-being.
Yes. And they start to put their needs
Right.
above their own.
And so the abuser becomes the source
The abuser becomes the source of both the pain,
of both and the
the pain, and the comfort.
Right, which creates this really messed up
Yeah.
dependence.
Yeah.
So you become dependent on them for both the good and the bad.
And so it makes it so hard to break free.
It makes it so hard to break free because on some level you're like, well, they're the only one who can comfort me.
They're the only one who understands me.
They're the only one who can make me feel better after they've hurt me.
Right. It's almost like a survival mechanism.
It is. It's like a really messed up survival
Because
mechanism.
your brain's been wired to connect.
Yeah, your brain has been wired to associate them
The person who hurts you
with relief from the pain.
with relief from the pain.
Yeah.
And then we have this
Yeah,
loss of identity.
lost identity, yeah.
Which we saw in Jake's story.
Right.
So over time,
In a toxic relationship,
Yeah.
you start to lose
you
yourself.
might isolate from your friends. You
Oh,
give
yeah.
up your hobbies.
Yeah, the things that you used to love to do, you stop doing them.
Yeah. You stop doing.
You're constantly questioning your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Because your partner's telling you that they're wrong.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. You're crazy.
You're overreacting.
Yeah.
And so you start to forget
You forget who you were before the relationship.
who you were before the relationship.
Yeah.
And then leaving becomes terrifying.
It does because you don't even know who you are anymore.
You don't have a sense of self.
Right. So it's like you're stepping out into this void
Into this void.
with no compass.
So it's this
Yeah.
fear of the unknown
The fear of the unknown is huge.
coupled with the eroded self-worth.
Right. You don't feel good about yourself.
It makes
You don't feel worthy of love.
it so hard to leave.
So hard to leave.
And then we have all of the lies that we tell ourselves.
Oh, to stay.
We tell ourselves so many lies.
So we become experts at twisting reality
Yeah, I do.
to fit this desire to hold on to this relationship.
And we become so good at it.
Even when the evidence is telling us
Right.
it's not good for us.
That this is not healthy.
Yeah.
This is bad for you.
So what are some of those common lies?
Okay, so one of the biggest lies that I hear all the time
Yeah.
is they'll change if I just love them enough.
That is so common.
It's so common. It's so deeply ingrained.
We think that if we just love them hard enough,
If we just try hard enough, if we're patient enough, understanding enough,
they'll come around.
they'll come around. They'll see how much we love them.
And they'll change.
And they'll change.
But that's not really how it works.
But it's not.
Because change has to come.
Change has to come from within.
Yeah.
It has to come from them.
From within the person.
They have to want to change.
and your love for them isn't going to make them want to change.
What's another one?
Another one is, well, they're only like this because of their past trauma.
Right.
And you know what? That might be true.
It might be true.
They might have some trauma in their past
Yeah.
that's contributing to their behavior.
But it doesn't excuse it.
But it doesn't excuse the abuse.
Yeah.
It doesn't give them a free pass to treat you however they want.
Right.
Just because they've been hurt in the past.
You can have empathy
You can have empathy.
for their past.
Yeah.
But you don't have to accept
You don't have to accept the behavior.
the harmful actions.
Right. You can still love them
Right.
and have empathy for them,
But not accept the behavior.
but also set boundaries and say, hey, this is not okay.
Yeah.
You can't treat me this way.
What about,
Yes.
I can't leave because I still love them?
That's a big one, too.
That's a tough one.
It is. Because love is complicated.
Love is complicated.
Yeah, and you can still love someone and care for someone very deeply,
Yeah.
even if the relationship is toxic.
Right. But love shouldn't be a reason to stay.
It shouldn't.